My wife demanded I fire my assistant because she's too pretty. What she found in my office the next day made her regret everything. I, 32M, never thought I'd be sharing something like this online, but I need to get this off my chest. My wife and I have been married for 6 years, generally happy despite the usual ups and downs. I run a small but growing architectural firm that I built from scratch after leaving a larger company. Success didn't come easy. I worked 70-hour weeks for years, sacrificing weekends and holidays while my wife supported me emotionally and financially during the tough early stages. 3 months ago, I hired a new assistant. She's extremely qualified with a business degree and experience managing offices for companies larger than mine. She's professional, efficient, and frankly, transformed our chaotic workflow into something manageable. For the first time in years, I've been able to come home at reasonable hours instead of midnight. Last week, my wife stopped by the office unexpectedly to bring me lunch. She'd never done this before, which I found sweet. I introduced her to my team, including my assistant. Everything seemed fine, though my wife was quieter than usual on the drive home. That night, she dropped the bomb. "I want you to fire your assistant," she said while we were getting ready for bed. I was completely blindsided. What? What? She's too pretty. I saw how she looks at you. I nearly laughed, thinking she was joking, but her expression made it clear she was dead serious. My assistant is professional to a fault. She calls me sir, despite my repeated requests to use my first name, and keeps our interactions strictly business. That's ridiculous, I said. She's an excellent employee who's making the business run smoothly. I'm not firing someone because of their appearance. My wife's face hardened. So you admit you find her attractive? That's not what I said. I'm saying her appearance has nothing to do with her job performance, which is excellent. The argument escalated. My wife insisted she'd seen the way we interact and claimed there was obvious chemistry. I tried explaining that what she was seeing was simply professional rapport, but she wouldn't hear it. Either she goes, or I go, she finally declared before grabbing her pillow and heading to the guest room. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, completely baffled. My wife had never shown this level of jealousy before. We'd always had a trusting relationship. Something wasn't adding up. The next morning, she left for work without speaking to me. I decided to go to the office early to clear my head. While reviewing my assistant's recent work, she'd organized our chaotic client files and created a new scheduling system. I had a realization. My wife wasn't seeing things clearly because she'd never actually seen me in my professional environment before. She'd supported me for years, but had never witnessed me running my business or interacting with my team. I texted my wife, "I understand your concerns. I'm not going to make any hasty decisions, but could you meet me at the office after work today? There's something I want to show you." She replied with just a thumbs-up emoji. That day, I asked my assistant to pull together our project timeline for the downtown renovation, our biggest client. She efficiently gathered everything, explaining each phase clearly during our team meeting. When my wife arrived that evening around 6 p.m., most of the staff had left. My assistant was still there finalizing some paperwork. I could see my wife's jaw tighten when she spotted her. "Come into my office," I said gently. I closed the door and gestured to my desk, where I'd laid out photos of all our projects from the past 5 years, along with financial statements showing the company's growth. "Do you know what's different about the last 3 months?" I asked. My wife shrugged, clearly not in the mood for games. "For the first time, I'm not doing everything myself. Look at this calendar." I showed her my schedule before and after hiring my assistant. I used to work until midnight most days. Now I'm home for dinner. I'm not constantly exhausted or stressed. That doesn't change. I held up my hand. "Before you say anything else, I want you to see something." I pulled up the security camera feed from my office on my computer. The footage showed my assistant and me in various meetings over the past week. In every single interaction, she maintained perfect professional distance, handed me documents without our fingers touching, and spoke to me with clear professional respect. "This is what you saw between us," I said quietly. "This is our chemistry. She's good at her job, and I appreciate that." That's it. My wife was silent, staring at the screen. "I'm not going to fire someone who's excellent at their job because of unfounded jealousy," I continued. "But I want to understand where this is coming from. This isn't like you." She sat down heavily in my office chair, her anger seeming to deflate. "I don't know. When I saw her, something just clicked in my head. She's beautiful, she spends more time with you than I do, and she helps you in ways I never could with your business. Is that what this is about?" I asked, realization dawning. "You feel replaced?" She looked away, which told me everything. "You were struggling for years, and I couldn't help beyond moral support. Then she comes in, and suddenly everything's better." I knelt in front of her chair. "The only reason I was able to hire her is because of you. You supported us when this business was nothing. You believed in me when no one else did. She's processing paperwork and managing schedules. You built the foundation that made all of this possible. She wiped at her eyes. I guess I got insecure. When I saw her, I realized I don't know this part of your life at all. I've never seen you as the boss, in your element. You seem different, confident, authoritative, with someone who looks like her always by your side. Just then, there was a knock at the door. My assistant poked her head in, unaware of our conversation. Sorry to interrupt, sir. I finished the Henderson portfolio and wanted to let you know I'm heading out. Oh, she noticed my wife. Good evening, ma'am. I didn't realize you were here. My wife straightened up. Actually, could you come in for a moment? I tensed, having no idea what my wife was about to say. My assistant stepped in, maintaining a respectful distance. I owe you an apology, my wife said, surprising us both. I made some assumptions that weren't fair. Thank you for helping my husband build his business and for making it possible for him to come home at reasonable hours. My assistant looked momentarily confused but recovered quickly. I'm just doing my job, ma'am. Your husband built this company through his own talent and hard work. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be part of it. After she left, my wife turned to me. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Later that night at home, we had a longer conversation. She admitted she'd been feeling disconnected from my work life, which had always been such a huge part of who I am. The assistant situation had just been a trigger for deeper insecurities. I was afraid you'd find her more interesting than me, she confessed. She understands your work in ways I never will. That's her job, I reminded her. She doesn't understand me like you do. She doesn't know how I like my coffee or which side of the bed I prefer. She doesn't know my fears or dreams. We agreed to make some changes. I'd share more about my workday, not just the problems, but the successes too. She'd stop by the office for lunch once a week so she could feel more connected to that part of my life. And most importantly, we promised to talk about insecurities before they exploded into ultimatums. The next day, my wife sent a small gift basket to the office with a note apologizing to the entire team for monopolizing the boss's attention the day before. My assistant handled it with perfect professionalism, of course. It's been a few weeks now, and things have been better than ever. My wife has even asked my assistant for advice on potentially starting her own business, something she'd always dreamed about but never pursued. Looking back, what could have been a disaster turned into an opportunity for growth. My wife saw that her fears were unfounded, and I realized I'd been keeping my work life too separate from our marriage. Sometimes what seems like jealousy is really just a fear of being left behind or forgotten. I'm sharing this because I nearly fired an excellent employee based on unwarranted jealousy, which would have hurt my business and our marriage in the long run. Instead, by confronting the real issue head-on, we ended up stronger. If you're facing a similar situation, look deeper than the surface accusation. There's usually something more meaningful underneath.